Good evening, Lake Elsinore. Wow, we had a moving and a shaking type of day. We are going to cover a couple of new updates that are coming throughout the city in the not too distant future, as well as a couple of somber notes at the end about memorials and as well as some of the public safety issues that we've had here recently. My name is Steve Manos, and this is Facebook Live. I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight. If you're new to this particular broadcast, what we do is once every Wednesday for the month, we get together, we go ahead and talk a little bit about what's happening around the city and give some updates. And then towards the end of the evening, we will certainly go through and take some questions live. So if you do have questions, start putting them in now. I'll be happy to go ahead and pick and choose, and we'll do our best to go ahead and answer those questions live on the scene. Now, if you were in town, you might have felt there was a little bit of a bump and a rumble as we experienced our first Lake Elsinore-centered, epicentered earthquake right here in town. It was located right off of Alvarado. For those of you who haven't been here very long, surprise, we have fault lines here in the city of Lake Elsinore, several of them running right alongside the lake, as well as a couple of cross fault lines that come across the mountain and various other places. This particular earthquake measured in initially at a 3.9. I think it's been revised to a 3.0. The city, and I make jokes, but the city does take these types of matters very seriously. And so our first responders were initially on high alert, and we looked at the idea of do we need to open up the emergency operations center? That didn't happen, didn't need to. A couple of small reports of very small damage, minor damage surrounding the city areas. We didn't have any interruption in any of our utilities, neither the electricity or gas, and when the gas is probably the one that we worry about more. Water, everything was operating normally. So in my home, we had a decoration that knocked over, and I'm sure we will rebuild there. But more or less, if you live in Southern California, you're used to these types of tremblers. It probably felt a little more strong here today just because it was epicentered here. It is a good opportunity for us to go ahead and remind the public that natural disasters are a fact of life. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. And so what we try to impress upon people is to be prepared. And there's a number of resources online, including the city website, that gives great details on what to do to get ready. You want to have some food that's ready to eat. You also want water, good water that you can keep on hand so you could survive a couple of days if the utilities do go down, or perhaps you're in an area that first responders can't get to very quickly. So we encourage folks to stay on top of that, talk to your family, have a plan, make sure that you protect your loved ones as well as your furry loved ones. Don't forget those. And it's always good to have kind of a go bag that has an easy way of picking up and grabbing important papers and documents, birth certificates, identification cards, passports, grant deeds, things of that nature. You have those things in a place where you can go ahead and grab them and get them out. Family photos are another one. So certainly get prepared, and maybe today was a bit of a wake-up call for everyone. We'll continue to make progress around the city on a number of projects. Folks may notice that in addition to some of the construction activity that's happening downtown, that underneath Railroad Canyon, we just had the light-up signs in the underpass. And this is the city's continuing effort to beautify the city. We certainly want to make sure that Lake Elsinore stands out as being unique. If you go back, we can talk about some of the steel sculptures that were placed in and around the outlet center We can talk about the light sculptures that we placed downtown at Gettleman Square. If you haven't seen those light up at night, and they're very beautiful. And you might also have noticed that around town you see a lot of the city's markers at its points of entry. So if you go, say, down Railroad Canyon towards Canyon Lake, you'll see a City of Lake Elsinore sign or in Central, or maybe at the end of the entrance of Ortega Highway. This is the city's continuing investment in our community to make it look better, to demark the important areas. We also ask all developers to use the city's branding and logo to continue to brand the city and further our dream extreme. And so the underpass is just another example of that. And you will also see very similar types of artwork underneath Main Street once Main Street is completed. So I got lots of compliments about that. I wanted to go ahead and acknowledge our staff for following through and making that happen. It certainly is a way of making the city a little bit more special. Update about the lake. The lake levels are roughly at about 1,247 feet above mean sea level. I've seen some activity online where folks were asking questions with respect to different colors that are in the lake, and there's a couple of different reasons why there could be different coloration variations within the lake, and it's hard to tell sometimes from certain angles. The city is treating the lake with not just the nanobubble technology, but also through the algicide program. And this peroxide-based algicide will sometimes impact the algae that's forming in a way that causes a different color pigmentation in the lake. That could be an explanation. We also have a much better clarity in the lake. And our lake does have variations in depth. So if you have the sun hitting in a certain way and it's a certain amount of clarity, then that can cause those variations. The other thing is that when the wind's blowing, the algae that's in the water column can move. So sometimes you can see a clearing out of that effect, or you could see the maybe parts of the lake are seeing the algae move to a different part or lowering themselves into a different part of the algae column through the water column, depending on what time of day it is and just heat, light, different measurements. So there's a lot of reasons why that could be. I can tell you that we've done measurements on the lake with respect to the microcystins, and those are the toxins that are created by cyanobacteria, the blue-green algae, and the levels in most of areas of the lake have dropped. Now, we're noticing that we're having some issues over Elm Grove Beach, and I should also allow the public to know that there is going to be reclaimed water going back into the lake here very soon as the lake water levels have dropped, and they are looking at pumping that back into the lake. So we're monitoring that. We want to go ahead and make sure that we're measuring things as they happen. And that may very well go ahead and reveal some things. So we continue to work with our agency partners on new solutions, and we're looking forward to being able to announce new solutions being implemented. One item to note: the council, not in the last meeting, but the meeting beforehand, authorized the acquisition of 2 additional nanobubblers, and those nanobubbler systems will have 10 times the capacity that the current nanobubbler system is. There's enough evidence to go ahead and show that the increased oxygen in the lake and the ability of the lake to actually go ahead and heal itself. The lakes tend to have that, and ours was so far out of balance that it had a problem doing so. The oxidation rate in the lake water quality near the bottom of the lake has improved so much that we thought that it was a good idea to go ahead and invest in 2 further systems. I wanted to go ahead and take a moment to thank our Congressman Ken Calvert for helping to go ahead and acquire some federal funding to assist with that. As a matter of fact, he's helped bring in about $8 million this year just to go ahead and not only deal with the lake water, but also other issues. We did have an opportunity to meet with the congressman this week, both myself and Councilwoman Natasha Johnson, as well as our code enforcement team, sheriff's department set team, and our partners at SWAG, we all met over at the Anchor so we could go ahead and demonstrate to the congressmen and their staff how we are operating and how we are dealing with homelessness in Lake Elsinore. We talked about our challenges as well as our successes, and one story was very compelling about a person who was essentially trapped in a cycle of homelessness and addiction. And this person has made a recovery thanks in part to the existence of the Anchor. And she has gone on to get a degree and had offers. She also cleared her criminal record, which was extensive, through the ROC program, which allows people who go through a recovery system to do that. And she could have worked for the Department of Defense with her new lease on life and degrees, but she decided to come back and give back to the community by joining SWAG. And now she's out going to the places where she used to see people, and she is now working to go ahead and just deal and help to go ahead and deal and help people to heal from the homeless epidemic that we're seeing. We learned a lot, and we certainly heard a lot. And for folks who don't know, there's been 121 street exits so far year to date for individuals that have gone through the Anchor. And I think that's something to applaud. And I certainly appreciate the efforts of my fellow colleagues who head that subcommittee, and that is Mayor Pro Tem Brian Tisdale and Councilwoman Natasha Johnson. These guys are doing a really good job of keeping a close eye on that system. Just kind of switching gears a little bit, we had some communication online with respect to roadside memorials, and so there was a lot of discussion about that. And so the city, this is a sensitive subject, obviously. Somebody loses their life on the road. We certainly do respect that, and we want to go ahead and give people time to grieve. And so when roadside memorials are placed on our public right-of-ways, we certainly do seek to note them and then let them exist for a time period. And that time period can range because it's kind of an unofficial policy. The official policy is anything in the public right-of-way, even just simple signage. Most people see like for sale or maybe let's say a yard sign, or having a yard sign. We take when they're attached or they're in the public right of way, we take those down right away because, those types of signs can sometimes block other signs. They can be distraction on the roadways. And so the reality is that the effort is to go ahead and keep the roadways clear. But when it comes to memorials, we relax those standards a bit. And so the memorials can exist anywhere from 2 weeks to up to 2 months. It just depends on the size and the impacts that it's having on the roadways. Is it a distraction? Has it fallen apart? Did somebody desecrate this memorial and now it's halfway out in the roadway? And then, of course, if the roadway also falls on private property, which sometimes it does, the private property owners can also remove those types of memorials. So we don't have control over all of that. I will say that when we do remove those memorials, we do tend to store those memorials and the materials from them at the city yard, and we keep that for a period of time. So if you have placed a memorial for a loved one and it has disappeared, the first place that I would check is our city yard down at the end of Flagstaff. Now, we do have a program where folks can apply to have either a tree or a bench dedicated at our city parks. And this is a permanent way of paying homage to a friend or a family member that's been lost within the city. We also have our Veterans Memorial and First Responders Memorial, and folks can buy a brick for the Veterans Memorial. We open the applications for that during a particular time of the year, and we usually announce that both online and on social media. So pay attention to that. But for the most part, those that do place memorials at the parks are responsible for maintaining. So if there's any type of damage or people deface them in some way, shape, or form, it falls on the family to make sure that they keep those up. So certainly want to go ahead and show respect and love for members for our community. This issue was raised for a particular person. The gentleman's name was Nick, and we did find that memorial at the Public Works yard, and the person that made that initial concern known has been notified via messenger. So we definitely dealt with that. So I'm going to wrap up. There's been a lot happening in the city. It feels like it's been a hot summer, and we've been dealing with everything from an increase in illnesses within the city and algae blooms when we didn't expect them, and and then on a much more serious note, we had a stabbing murder at a major retailer, and we certainly are sensitive to that. I had some folks who asked questions about that, and I think when something like this happens, it's shocking, right? We don't expect that in our community. We certainly don't accept that as being tolerable. And so the question happens, why did it happen? And when the explanation for why it happened doesn't make sense, we start looking for, well, how do we prevent this from happening again? In this particular instance, we had an individual who just woke up in the morning, according to certain reports, decided that they were going to do harm to others in a significant way. And this person went to one retail establishment and couldn't find what they were looking for, and left that retail establishment, and then left their city and came to Lake Elsinore and visited another major retailer. I'm not mentioning the retailers because the retailers didn't do anything wrong. This was a very, very random act of violence, which is scary. That person went into the store, and the interaction, I guess, between that person and the victim, was very light, and then the incident occurred. Now, some people say we need to go ahead and respond to this in some way, shape, or form. We need to change policy in some way, shape, or form. And I can say this. We could spend every penny we have and put an officer on every single corner of our street, and that wouldn't have stopped what happened on August 9th. It just was impossible. The incident in question occurred at 7 a.m. We had law enforcement officers on site within 4 minutes. It was under 4 minutes that they responded. And there was actually an individual there who had started administering life-saving practices right away, and despite that, loss of life occurred. The suspect left the scene immediately. It happened so quickly that people had no idea who had even done it, and they must have reviewed video because there were some specifics released pretty quickly and known amongst the people that were there that certainly pointed to the fact that video was reviewed, and then you had a very overwhelming response within a very short period of time by the sheriff's department, who then proceeded to essentially shut down a very large retailer with lots of customers and lots of employees, take control of the scene, and they had to do that quickly in order to preserve the evidence that's on the scene. Because their job now is to go ahead and collect evidence and make sure that the person that's caught for doing it never sees the light of day again. It's the best that they could do. And all of that happened, all of it happened very, very quickly. So Sheriff's Department certainly did the job, and they should be commended. And trust me, our job is to provide oversight. If there were problems there, we would certainly be dealing with that, but they did the best that they could do. The suspect, and I have to call him a suspect because we have a court of law and people are entitled to the process. This person went home, reportedly was discovered by a family member who saw the obvious and convinced this person to turn themselves in peacefully. Again, the Sheriff's Department conducted themselves professionally, and that person was taken into custody without incident. You can't ask much more from the Sheriff's Department. This particular incident is not a policing problem, because he was caught very quickly. They responded with overwhelming force. They secured the scene. They collected evidence. This was all done very professionally. You can't complain about that. And this particular suspect has a history, and certainly was released recently from state prison, convicted of robbery, but arrested for aggravated assault in a situation that was very similar to what happened in Lake Elsinore here recently. And that's frustrating, because it seems like there was some sort of plea deal. Different circumstances in that case, and folks can go online and probably find more information about that. But again, that person committed a crime, and the police did the job of capturing that person, collecting evidence to convict that particular person. And our criminal justice system, for some reason, missed the opportunity to interrupt this criminally minded person, either to go ahead and rehabilitate them, or to keep them in jail and punish them and deter them from doing that again through other means. And it cost somebody a life. And we live in California, and quite frankly, this has kind of been the way that we've trended here over the past decade. I mean, I can go back to 2011, and we can talk about AB 109. AB 109 was it's the realignment bill. AB 109 was passed when Governor Brown was still in office. It was done as a way to save money for the state, and essentially what it did is it took some crimes, nonviolent crimes, and pushed the responsibility for housing those people that were convicted of those crimes to the local jails. This is an effort to empty the state prisons and to save the state money, of course, at the cost of local jails. And so what happened was suddenly the local jails were overcrowded, and this is how we started down the path of having a revolving door at these prisons. Robbery is different than aggravated assault, and certainly different from attempted murder, which is probably what should have been the charge. I'm not a lawyer, but you would think. But he was charged. He was convicted of robbery and received 5 years, and served 4 of those 5 years, and apparently was considered nonviolent, which obviously was wrong. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, obviously there's some changes that could happen at Sacramento. For those who don't know how municipal governments work, we do not create criminal laws. We do not create laws that put people in prison. We cannot create those laws. That's reserved for the state. And, in talking to some of our state representatives, we have a former district attorney that represents us as an assemblyman. We have a former firefighter, a retired firefighter who represents us at the state Senate level. They get it, but they're in the minority, the vast minority. Now, my coaches used to tell me that if you don't pay attention to the small things, it has ripple effects. It can cause bigger problems. And so this November, residents are going to get an opportunity to vote on a bill, an initiative, I should say. And the initiative is called Prop 36. This initiative would amend Prop 47, which was passed in 2014. Prop 47 was called Safe Neighborhood and Schools Act, which is deceptive, because really what that particular initiative did was it reduced and capped the penalty for repeat offenders of low-level drug crimes, as well as the petty theft under $950, which this has also contributed to that revolving door system. So this would remove those caps and make repeat offenders potentially eligible for felonies, and would also go ahead and designate those people for housing at the state prison level, which the governor and many people in Sacramento really don't like that. They're trying their best to go ahead and make the case that this shouldn't happen. But I would use the example of, Al Capone, okay? Al Capone did all sorts of horrible things, organized crime and whatnot, but he was never convicted of organized crime. He was convicted of tax evasion and spent the rest of his life in jail, as we all know. It's a very famous thing. Well, in the same light, when you find people who are stealing small amounts, or you find people who are openly using drugs, or you find people, that are mentally not right, potentially dangerous, but you can't really go ahead and take them to jail or take them to a mental health institute for that. But you do find that they're self-medicating with some sort of illicit drug. These are the opportunities that we get to actually intervene into the lives of people. And so we can see it with our own two eyes. There's been the deterioration of some once great cities like San Francisco or San Diego or Los Angeles. If you go to Sacramento itself, man, I got to tell you, I've been going to Sacramento since, say, 2010. And I've been there recently, and I got to tell you, it is sad. It is just the saddest thing that I've seen, that particular location. The capital of the state is in such a bad state that it should be very clear for anybody with eyeballs that there's a problem with the way we deal with criminal justice. So I would encourage folks to go ahead and strongly consider voting yes on Prop 36 this year. That will help. And certainly other things we can do is be vigilant. If you see something that is off, especially about an individual, you have to pay attention to that and certainly protect yourself in those instances. We should also be working to create a better relationship with our law enforcement professionals as well as our city council, city staff, code enforcement. Again, you get opportunities to go ahead and intervene into the lives of some people before they get really bad, and that is something that we certainly need to do. And I encourage folks to be the eyes and ears of the city, because if there's 72,000 people that are looking out for the city, it is a lot easier than the 115 that work here at City Hall. I would encourage folks to take self-defense and certainly consider a firearm for personal protection. We have a sheriff that certainly issues concealed carry permits pretty regularly, and so folks should be trained. If you know the process that it takes to get a concealed carry permit, then you know that there's lots of training and education that's involved with that, and we certainly do want more good guys with guns. So that's that. It's been a long couple of weeks, so I appreciate everyone hanging in there with us. We are about a half hour in, so let's go ahead and start taking some questions. Our first question comes from Lori. Is the building that was slightly damaged on Main Street today on the list for demolition during the Main Street makeover? It has been an eyesore for years. The answer to that is no, it is not. And so the history of the building, lovingly referred to as the Ambassador Hotel, is that was a former bank. It was a former hotel, Ambassador Hotel. Funny story. There was a rumor that Grover Cleveland had stayed there. The guest books had been reviewed, and that was later debunked as an old wives' tale here in Lake Elsinore, which, we're 140 years old, so a lot of old wives' tales there. So that was debunked. Later, it became a restaurant, and then in the early 80s, it closed, and it closed pretty much permanently. The building is made of unreinforced masonry. The inside is pretty bad. As a matter of fact, there's a tree growing within it. And the city had actually cited, it is red tagged right to this day, and the city had designated it for a receivership action, which means that we would have taken it and either renovated it or demolished it, one of the two. But the bottom line is that before we could get through that process, somebody came in to actually buy the building. And so they made certain commitments to restore the building, and that owner, and they're great owner, great intentions, right? Those folks brought forward a plan that unfortunately didn't really meet the standards that the city council had for essentially addressing some of the off-site concerns that might be created by the new activity there. And so we're stuck in this process where we have somebody that owns this building, and they're going to have to go through and get reports and studies and whatnot, and that can take a year or two. And then you have this earthquake. Now, the earthquake's created some new stresses. I don't know if that's dangerous or not, we're going to have building safety probably take a look at that and make an assessment. But the bottom line is that the building is not slated for demolition at this time. That could change. And thank goodness the earthquake was as moderate as it was, because based on what I saw with my eyes, if it had been any stronger, that building probably would have come down and could have potentially hurt somebody. So we'll see what happens. Let's see here. We've got Moncherry Berry. When will construction be completed on Main Street? So there's a couple of different types of construction that are happening along Main Street. Largely everything should be wrapped up in about another year. So you have City Hall, which that's going to take a full year. And then we have some other upgrades. Street, we're redoing the street from the exit all the way down to the main drag of City Hall. So that's all going to be done, and that'll be completed much sooner, pending weather and other factors. So you'll see you're seeing a lot of work done on the streets right now as we're running fiber optics through the streets and essentially preparing for the future. We're taking the opportunity to do that. It's a little painful, and we apologize for any delays that folks may be experiencing as a result of that, but that part of it should be done quickly. The closure at Graham and Maine specifically, I asked about that, and because of the safety concerns that come from the construction and processes and staging, that particular area is going to be closed down probably for another full 12 months. So stay tuned. Our guys tend to get their projects done. The projects that we control tend to get done early. The projects that we contract out for, those guys tend to take a little bit longer. So hang in there, okay? Culp, I guess, Esther says, please don't accept any people from LA when they start cleaning out for the Olympics. They're going to start busing them out to other cities and counties. Appreciate that. We'll be paying a very close attention to that. As a matter of fact, part of the discussion when the congressman was out here was about that exactly. And one of the things that both code enforcement, law enforcement, and the nonprofit organization stated was that that particular tactic doesn't work very well. It really just doesn't. The difference between what we do and what other cities do has entirely to do with consistency. You see, we have a set team of people who go out every single day to engage with our homeless individuals every day. And if you know anything about homeless people, then these people have certain spots that they pick, maybe 2 or 3. They move around a little bit for the most part. They want to go ahead and be left alone, and they have their spots, okay? So our guys all figure out where their spots are. We've been around the block, and especially when somebody vacates and a new person comes in, first thing they do is they get to know who this person is, where they came from, what their issues are, and a file's created. This is different than other places. This is different than just about any other place, quite frankly. And so, anybody who comes out here thinking that it's going to be all nice and easy breezy and they can go hang out by the lake and the beach and whatnot, and it's going to be all fun and games, it's not like that at all. And the only people that we really have issues with are the folks that actually grew up here or lived here. They are certainly individuals that know the area. They typically have either good friends or family who are close. If you're homeless, you want to be in a place where you're familiar. You want people who you can go to if you need a sandwich, in a dire situation, or a shower in a bad situation, or if you get sick. You want to be close to some lifelines. And so we don't normally keep people for very long for those reasons. Excuse me. Thank you. All right. Next question. Will we ever see extreme sports events in Lake Elsinore again? I certainly think so, and especially as we continue working on the lake and changing the dynamics around that. We used to have the high-speed boating that used to come out here, as well as the jet ski races. I think those are probably the prime ones to come back first. I do know an individual that wants to get the Grand Prix going again, but the Grand Prix is something that takes about a year to basically plan and get people signed up for, and fundraise for. You got to get sponsorships, you have to get permits, and all of that takes a lot of time. So you probably won't see that this year, but we are certainly recruiting and trying to go ahead and help groups get that going again. And then, we just basically are working to go ahead and attract other types of things. The sports complex could very well still move forward. They're working with the tribes still on resolving those issues, but there's also secondary sites that we may talk about. And then it's not quite sports, but entertainment-wise, right now the city is reviewing plans to build potentially an amphitheater. And I haven't talked about that yet. We're probably going to focus a little segment about that in the future, but we are starting to game plan locations as well as designs for an amphitheater. And of course, it'll take a few years before that comes to fruition. We got to still go ahead and establish where funding and everything comes for that. But we're thinking about the future while things are being built right here, right now. So let's see here. Is it true the Lake Elsinore outlets are for sale? I believe that is true. I've heard that they're not openly for sale, but they are certainly. I think they're open for offers right now, and I've heard that there's some discussions about groups that are very successful in the retail world who are looking to take that over. I think the problem there is price point. And the current ownership attempting to change, they've been kind of exploring the idea of changing zoning and either building a bunch of apartments there or, a mile long of industrial buildings. And these are things that the city's pretty much signaled that we're really not interested in. At least I have personally. So I think they're looking for an exit plan. They certainly are having some challenges there. Promoting, and you have to question whether or not the team there that owns the building right now has the capacity to do what they intended to do originally. And of course, they're trying to recoup their investment, and there's a question as to whether or not that's feasible for them to do. So all of these things are challenges that are outside the city's purview, and we wish them luck, and we certainly hope that they are able to go ahead and continue working that site so that it brings it back to the heyday when we remember it, a hustle and bustle. I mean, really, honestly, there's been some great opportunities. You saw the Family Fun Fest that went out there, and tons of people went out to visit. So it's not like people aren't willing to go there, if there's something there to go to, right? And, and I heard the retailers there had the best day of sales that they'd ever had on that weekend. So, very interesting. Maybe they can get creative and start doing more of those types of events. I don't know. We're pulling for them, but that's kind of on them. They gotta pull it together. Tiffany writes, can we turn the old golf course to an archery range? The area needs a good one. Riverside Archery is too far. That's an interesting concept. The golf course at Summerlee is a privately owned entity. I've heard that is also up for sale, and certainly there's an individual, I think a golf professional is what's been rumored, who is currently either negotiating or acquiring that particular property. The site for quite a while was underwater. I do not know what the status of the golf course is now, or if they intend to restore it to its former glory. Yeah, I would imagine archery wouldn't be a bad idea. It's a suggestion I'll pass along to staff, and maybe when we're interacting with them, it's something that they would consider. Jasmine, or Joseph, says, hello, Mayor. Any updates on the mega warehouse project? Not at this time. There's an application pending, and there's reports, public outreach, and a long ways to go before that's even considered. But there's been no updates. There's no pending council meetings or public hearings that I know of that are on the horizon for that particular project. And really, I should ask, if I could ask you the question and be which one, because the one on the back basin sounds like it's no longer being considered by that group. And I think, I do commercial real estate, and for those of you who aren't familiar with the markets right now, things are slowing down quite a bit. Earlier this year, it slowed down quite a bit for smaller industrial buildings under 500,000 square feet. And it seems like the mega warehouses, the ones that are over 1 million square feet, seem to be suffering in terms of there's a lot of them sitting on the market right now in the region. So when you have a glut of inventory, that kind of puts a little bit of a stiff arm on people who may be planning to develop out certain things. It could be years before we see anything kind of roll around. So I would keep an eye on that, and I'm happy to give reports and answer questions about that. But at this time right now, there's been nothing new presented to the council as they're essentially working through the process at their pace. Nicholas writes, any plans for building pickleball courts? Actually, we had some plans brought forward about putting pickleball courts over at Serenity Park, but there was some slight pushback from maybe some of the neighbors and potentially some of the representatives that represent that area, because that strip park has largely begun to fill in with a lot of different amenities, and there is value by some residents there of having just an open space where they can, throw a football or run around or have a picnic and things of that nature. And so filling that space in with pickleball courts, the concern is that, there wouldn't be space for that any longer. So that's been held up. Whenever we have, and then of course you had the Christensen Park outreach that happened this last weekend, and it was certainly an interesting conversation. We're pulling some information from that, and maybe pickleball's part of that. But that one's largely being focused as we're looking for ways to go ahead and help folks that have special needs enjoy themselves. Just want to remind folks that day before yesterday was National Pickleball Day. And so there's a drop-in pickleball that starts Wednesday, August 14th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. At the Recreation Center. So you can check that out, the Recreation Center on Grab. And that happens every Wednesday. So check that out. All right. Next one. We've got, we got a compliment from Celeste. Thank you very much. I have absolutely no problem. It's one of my favorite things to do is go ahead and communicate with the public. Brendan says, thank you, Mayor. It's been a year since we've had any sporting events. Well, we do have the Storm baseball team, who is going to be in the finals here for minor league baseball, and certainly that's nothing to sneeze at. So I'll be there on Friday. So if you're really interested in seeing some quality family fun, that would certainly be it. You'll be watching championship minor league baseball there. But I hear what you're saying. And we are certainly part of what we're doing is we're looking for not just action sports anymore, but action entertainment. And that involves not just the sports community. It also involves, trying to attract concerts and, kind of family events and movies in the park. And, we want to get back to having those mud runs again, the Iron Man stuff. And, earlier this year, part of the plan was to go ahead and do more of the 5Ks that were happening. And we'll do more of those later on this year as things cool off. It's too hot to do it right now. But we will with the Santa run. We did the Santa run last year. That was we did that. We had a lot of fun. I was dressed as an elf. It was a lot of fun. So we'll continue doing those things, and we'll certainly definitely invite people out. It's been tough though, right? Because Lucas Oil pulled out about 5 or 6 years ago, and we really don't have a replacement for that. And that was exciting. We did have some drag races that happened, those happen intermittently still. Those are a lot of fun to go to if you're into that. But I hear you. We'll keep working on that. Thank you. Let's see here. We got Myra who says, got a lot of mosquitoes. Okay, so that's great. I appreciate you bringing that up. So Mayor Pro Tem Tisdale is a representative on vector control. And for those of you who own a home, you look at your tax bill, you'll notice that there's a little teeny tiny like $3 to $5 fee that goes to vector control. And that is to deal with vectors, which includes mosquitoes, but also rats and other types of pests, right? So one of the invasive species that have come into this area are these ankle biter mosquitoes. And so there's been a lot of work done on this over the years. I had a real problem with them in my house last year, but then I listened to what Mayor Pro Tem Tisdale kept warning us about. And, you know, part of the problem is when it rains, we get water that collects like in pots or, you know, buckets or whatever. And sometimes it's even just the ground, you know, you have the ground shaped with a little dig out and water stays there for a couple of days. And, you know, all you need is a thimble full of water to have mosquitoes spawn around your house. And once they start going, it's just impossible to get rid of them. So last summer, it was so bad, I had to wear pants outside around my house. This year, I paid a lot of close attention to that, and we don't have any problems with that this year, and we didn't have any other type of mitigation for that. So pay attention to that. It's too late to do it this year, but during the rainy season, make sure to watch out for that. If you have sprinklers that hit something, collects water, make sure you go ahead and hit that. You know, if your neighbors have kind of that situation, you may want to knock on their door and let them know, because I'm sure they'd appreciate it. Those things are just horrible. Some of you don't have that option. You're around a waterway, and the waterways are, you know, outside of your control. And I can cite a specific example over in Summerlee where, you know, there was a lot of rain. Obviously, it collected near the golf course, and, you know, because there was a lot of water, it sat there, and that's kind of the back basin. That's kind of the way that works. But they were very concerned about mosquitoes, and sure enough, even far into the neighborhood, there was a lot of mosquitoes. And when I say they, I mean vector control, right? This is their area of expertise. They're probably going to have to fog that neighborhood, which involves noticing, and there's all sorts of things. But just know that there is a way to go ahead and get the government involved with that. So if you're not in Summerlee, I can tell you Summerlee is being paid attention to right now. If you're not in Summerlee and you're having those issues, call Northwest Vector Control. That is our vector control agency. I think they're up in Corona or Riverside. Contact them. Even if you're a renter, okay, yeah, they still represent you and represent this area, and let them know the problems that you're having. They'll send somebody, very customer service friendly. These guys are awesome. I called them about an issue about Summerlee, and they were out next day. I got a call back. I didn't even tell them I was the mayor, and they still went ahead and went through that process. So certainly you want to go ahead and utilize the resources that you have, and that's a great one. All right, let's see here. Javier writes, or Lorena, looks like we got another couple account here. Will there be new construction coming soon next to Storm Stadium? All that open space is going to waste. It will be nice to be able to go somewhere after a game at the Storm. All right, so you could be talking about one of two places there with that particular statement. Let's say that you're looking at the lake and you're next to the Storm. You're at the end of that road there. You're trying to get into the parking lot, and you're looking at the building, or you're looking at the property that's fenced off to the right, okay, immediate right. That lot is where the sports complex was being built. As a matter of fact, they were grading for it, and they were going to go vertical. And while they were grading, they turned up some artifacts, okay? And that particular site, I don't know why we're talking about it, but I'm not supposed to talk about it. But that site has been held up in that process for a number of years, even before COVID. We've talked to the owners and proprietors of that program. They say that they're still moving forward slowly. They've been having a hard time getting buy-in for the revised plans, and they've just basically come to the city a couple of times looking for help, which we've provided. It's just a very difficult situation, unfortunately, and there's some history there that I think there's some payback for that, some history. Across the street, now if you're at the back fence over in, say, left field, okay, no, right field, excuse me, and you go over the fence in right field, and the big tall wall over there, and you keep going, and there's another kind of triangular. It's not quite triangular. It's kind of like a rhombus shape, right? This particular location was originally slated for something called Artisans Alley, and the promoter, the builder for that, largely has given up on that. Okay, they are now shopping that piece of property to other people, and we're fielding interest from those people that are interested in buying the property for different projects. The last one we had came from a very good developer. I don't want to speak badly of the developer, but it's a very good developer. The zoning's mixed use, and their proposal was, I want to build a bunch of apartments, and we'll have a phase 2 where there'll be a commercial component. Right? We are like, no, we've been through that game before. We know what happens. The phase 1 gets built, we get all the apartments, and then the phase 2 never does get built, or it gets sold off to somebody who, puts something commercial related there, or they try to go ahead and get it swapped over into something else that we don't want. Point is, we told them thanks but no thanks. They threatened litigation at some point, and we told them go ahead and sue, and then they went away. So, again, great developer, and they may actually go ahead and build elsewhere within the city, but that's the backstory on that. So we have our economic development director. She's been on this show, and her name is Gina Gonzalez. We hired her. She used to work for a city that everybody says, why aren't we like that city? And so, she's the person that helped make that city like that city. So that's just the way I hear it in my head when I read it online. I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. Anyhow, so Gina is doing a great job right now of taking all of those connections and bringing them over here. The challenge is that she was just hired on a few months ago, and it takes years from the time that somebody has just even the basic concept of something like this to getting to the point where they can acquire the land, get the location, sign all the franchises that go on that spot, get the approval, go through the process, get through CEQA, do the public outreach, get to the planning commission, then the city council, and you get the approval, and it's great, and everybody celebrates. But then even after that happens, then they have to actually go through and execute the financing, go ahead and pull together the construction companies, true up the actual finance, the actual costs associated with the project, which includes sometimes widening roads, putting in street signals, turn signals, or bus stops, and it's a big process, and it's a long process, and it's difficult, and there's a million different places where they can fail. And so when something is getting built, that's part of the reason why we celebrate so much. We celebrate with those groundbreakings, but even groundbreakings don't necessarily translate to construction, as we've seen with the sports complex, or we see as with the Corridon Gateway project, which stopped midway. The city doesn't build these things. These are private operators building for private profits, and our job is to make sure that the buildings that they build are safe and that the impacts of their development are mitigated. That's our job. So, but we do try to promote, do try to make it as easy as possible, while also looking out for the little guy, looking out for the people that we represent. So, yeah, we're working on it. All right. Maria writes, we need all empty lots clean. There are lots of dry weeds, like the one on Riverside Drive in Lincoln across from Launch Point. It's an awful specific example there. I will mention that staff, and we'll have somebody go out and take a look at it. If I'm not mistaken, that lot was included for weed abatement. For those who don't know, as a government agency, we cannot just walk onto private properties and start clearing off the weeds. We have to go through this whole process. It's a weed abatement process. We do this annually, where we have our staff go around and identify all the lots that have weeds that qualify for notices of violation. Then we have to go through, notify the owners that they are in violation, give them time to cure the violation, provide secondary notices. Then there's a public hearing process that has to happen, so that they know that we are going to take control and abate the lot. And then we have to go through and do a filing in order to go ahead and get through the legal process. And the bottom line is that by the end of all of that, we get to the point where we can hire the contractor or contractors, and those contractors go around and they go to mow as fast as they can. And it takes time to clear everything. And we're in the middle of that process right now. On years where we have a lot of rain, like we had this year, we have to wait for that process to go a little bit longer, because if we start it too early, because we have a window that we have to clear those and then it closes. If we go too early, the weeds will pop back up and then they won't get addressed till the following year. And so we sometimes wait a little bit longer, which means that the weeds are a little higher, and that means that you get the situation like you have this year. So appreciate that. We'll go ahead and certainly reach out to our contractors, see if we can't get that addressed as quickly as possible. But thank you for that. So the last one, we have the final question. I have the final question in my hand. Brandon writes, are we prepared for the next major poppy flower bloom? We sure are, because all that happens now is that we close down Walker Canyon. We don't own it. It's all private reserve. You will never see anything like 2019, hopefully again in your lifetime. Look, I'm a big proponent of, promoting the city, right? Like when 2019 happened, that was a once in a lifetime sort of event and experience. And we certainly didn't know what we were in for when we started that process. And I have to tell you that the city staff really pulled together. These guys worked without weekends for almost 30 days straight, to the point where the labor unions were like, we need days off. You can't keep doing what you're doing to us. And so we were running into all sorts of limitations at some point where, you can only ask, even within a company, you can only ask people to run on their toes for so long before they get exhausted. And they're just like, I don't care what the problem is. I need some, days off. And so to accommodate the size of crowds that we had in 2019 would require our parking structure, probably, because we'd need a space where about 50,000 people per day could come in and out of the area, with facilities so that those people could also relieve themselves, staffing. We'd need some sort of security and a way of going ahead and dealing with all sorts of problems, from snake bites to people fighting with each other. So the bottom line is that there's no real utilities out where these poppies really did really well. So you're probably not going to see us invest in something like that when a parking structure like that would get used at best once per year. But let's be honest here, once every 20 years. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like there is a business aspect that we have to go ahead and look at. And some people may say, oh, well, you can just bust them over from the outlet center. You'd be amazed. People don't listen when you tell them, please don't park on the freeway, right? They'll take the ticket, right? People don't listen when they say, hey, don't trample on the flowers. People don't listen, when you tell them, hey, it's probably a bad idea to wear high heels when you go ahead and walk up a walking trail. People do some weird things, okay? So, for us, we don't, the city doesn't own it. We don't control it. CHP, got to remember that we lost Sergeant Steve Lycon during the 2019 event. That was tragic. CHP is very sensitive to the poppy blooms off of Lake Street. They control the freeways. They shut down Lake Street. Even some of the resources we had at the time available to us don't exist anymore. The place where the RV storage place was, we used that as parking and staging for a while. Nobody wants. I mean, the people that were impacted most really don't want that. So it's a tough thing, but probably not. Now, for the residents that live here, y'all know how to get back into the Walker Canyon area without using Lake Street, right? I mean, you can use a map and figure it out. So next time there's a poppy bloom, figure it out. Okay? All right. You didn't hear that from me. All right. With that, with that, thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you guys, we're going to take some of the other questions we didn't get answered to. We'll go ahead and try to respond to them later on. We will be doing this again middle of the month, next month in September. Certainly, I want everybody to take care of themselves in the heat. Make sure you're staying out of the sun for extended periods of time. Get your hydration. Get down to the lake, check that out. Everything's looking really, really good right now. Look out for your championship storm team, and look for some of the events that we have going on down at Main Street. Upcoming, you're going to have Oktoberfest happening at Launch Point. You're going to have Dia de los Muertos coming up in October, and we're going to keep rolling out all the events that make this city special. And with that, I thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.